Our warm-up activity, as always, is the big reveal, and I'm going to uncover 5 different clues that link to a really well-known business. You've just got to decide which business the clues relate to in the fewest number of clues. So hopefully by the time you get to clue number 5, you have successfully worked out the name of the business. The clues will get progressively easier as we move down the numbers. So the first clue is, it was founded in 1997 by Reed Hastings and Mark Randolph. Clue number 2, in 2000, Blockbusters, a video rental chain, rejected buying the business for £50 million. So some of you might have heard of this story, so you might know the business already. Number 3, it currently has 18.4 million subscribers in the UK. Number 4, a crackdown on password sharing in May 2023 resulted in an increase in the number of subscribers. Now, I'm sure some of you know the business already, but let's take a look at clue number 5. Its popular titles include Squid Games and Stranger Things, so of course it is Netflix. So well done if you successfully identified the name of that business. Our first activity that links to theme 1 today is a series of multiple choice questions. So question 1 is a 1-mark multiple choice question and you need to select one answer. So which one of the following is a way that new business ideas come about? Is it A, products become obsolete, B, changes in technology, C, changes in what consumers want, or D, adapting existing products? So reread the question carefully, relook at the different options and make a choice. So well done if you selected D, adapting existing products. Products becoming obsolete, changes in technology and changes in what consumers want all relate to reasons why new business ideas come about, whereas this question is asking how, a way that new business ideas come about, and that is through adapting existing products, or alternatively it's through entrepreneurs or innovators coming up with new ideas or original ideas. Now this content is right at the start of the specification, so you would have been taught this at the start of your business course, so it's worth just going back to look at 1.1.1 from the specification to make sure you are clear of the distinction between why new business ideas come about and how new business ideas come about. So question 2 is looking for 2 answers. Now in the exam you would obviously have 5 options to choose from, and in this question you've only got 4, but we are looking for 2 responses that are correct. So the question is, which 2 of the following are advantages to a business of selling goods online? So A, convenient, B, easy to compare product prices, C, access wider markets, and D, customer data can be collected. So we are looking for advantages to a business, so read each option carefully. So well done if you selected C, access wider markets, and D, customer data can be collected. Those are 2 clear advantages to a business. Now if you've selected A or B, or perhaps both, those are advantages of selling goods online, but they're actually advantages to customers. So therefore it's really important that you are ensuring that your answer matches the focus of the question. So in this instance it's got to be to a business. If it was a different stakeholder group to customer or to an employee, for example, in a different style of question, you must make sure you are selecting options that link directly to the question that is set. Now, if it was a 3-mark explain question and you put your point down as one advantage is that it's convenient, so therefore customers can look online really easily, and therefore that increases sales because you are accessing a wider market, then that's fine because you've twisted your answer back to a benefit to a business. But because this is a multiple choice question, we need to choose the options that are distinctly linked to a business, and in this case, this is clearly options C and D. So question 3 is a different style of multiple choice question. You have 2 statements to read and then decide whether each statement is true or false, and then match up your responses to either A, B, C or D. You will not see this style of question in your exam, but it's a really good way of assessing and checking your understanding of topic areas from the course content. So statement 1, employing a more diverse workforce may lead to better decision making within a business. Statement 2, consumer law requires all staff to follow health and safety regulations and report any hazards to the business. So read each statement again, decide whether each statement is true or false, and then choose the letter that you think corresponds with the correct answers. And the answer is, in fact, B. So well done if you chose B. So employing a more diverse workforce may lead to better decision making within a business. Your workforce will be more representative of your customer base, of the population that live and work within your organisation, and therefore you are much more likely to make better decisions. Statement 2, consumer law requires all staff to follow health and safety regulations and report any hazards to the business. Well, health and safety is not part of consumer law, so therefore that is why statement 2 is false. It is true that you need to be reporting hazards to the business or to managers within the business, but it's not part of consumer law. So well done again if you chose option B. So question 4 is in the same style as question 3. So 2 statements. As I read each statement, decide whether you think it is true or false, and then match up your answers with either A, B, C or D. So statement 1, if interest rates increase, retail businesses or shops are more likely to open new stores. Statement 2, if interest rates decrease, sales of non-essential and luxury products will fall. So reread each statement, decide if each statement is true or false, and then decide on the letter that matches your answer. So well done if you chose option D. So both statements are in fact false. So let's take a look at each one. If interest rates increase, retail businesses are more likely to open new stores. Now, when interest rates go up, it means the cost of borrowing increases. So taking out loans from the bank will be more expensive because businesses will have to pay more interest back to the bank. Now, that discourages business investment. So therefore, it's highly unlikely that retail businesses are going to open up new stores when interest rates rise. Looking at statement 2, if interest rates fall, sales of non-essential and luxury products will fall. Well, that's not true, because if interest rates decrease, it means the reward for saving, so getting some interest back from your savings in a building society or in a bank, is going to be lower. And this will encourage people to go out and spend. It will also mean, if interest rates fall, that loan repayments potentially, or mortgage repayments and credit card repayments, if they are not cleared in full, so any interest on credit cards will be lower. And therefore that will mean that consumers have higher disposable income and they're more likely to go out and spend this money on luxuries rather than on essentials. And this means that option D is the correct answer. So question 5 is in the same format as questions 3 and 4. So 2 statements to read, decide whether each statement is true or false, and then match up your idea or your answer with either letter A, B, C or D. So statement 1, a weakening economic climate is when levels of employment, production and consumer incomes fall. Statement 2, a fall in unemployment levels may result in higher wage costs for businesses that have job vacancies. So there's a lot of information to take in here. So reread each statement. Think about whether it's true or false, and then decide on the letter. You may wish to pause the video. Now this section of the specification of the course content is very, very content heavy. So it's from 1.5.4 of the specification. So obviously from theme 1, but it is a huge area in terms of course content. So the economic climate includes topic areas linked to unemployment, changing levels of consumer income, inflation, interest rates, government taxation and changes in exchange rates. And since the new specification came into play in 2019, the economy has been examined in every exam series. So not every aspect that I've talked about there, but Edexcel have selected an economic or 1 or 2 economic factors and base questions upon them within each exam series. So it's really, really important that you revise this area of the course content carefully. So let's go back to this question. So the answer is actually A. So well done if you did select A. Let's break down each statement and take a look at each one. So a weakening economic climate, so the economy is not doing very well, is when levels of employment, production and consumer incomes fall. So if the economy is weakening, businesses tend to cut back on their operations because there's lower demand for goods and services. Not in every instance, some businesses will benefit in a weakening economic climate, but many businesses will suffer. Therefore, people will lose their jobs, and as consumer incomes fall, there'll be less demand. So statement 2, a fall in unemployment levels may result in higher wage costs. Well, if there's a fall in unemployment levels, that means there's high employment. So there'll be less choice for businesses to choose from if they are looking to employ a new worker. So there'll be less unemployed people. Therefore, to attract people to move from their current position with an employer, they may have to offer higher wage costs or higher salaries, higher wages to these staff to tempt them to move to their business. And therefore, for these reasons, statement 1 and statement 2 are both true. Our next activity is our first calculation countdown question. And the quantitative skill that we're going to be focusing on within this calculation question is percentage increases. A tricky area of the specification in terms of quantitative skills, one that you need to practice. It's out of averages, percentages and percentage changes has been examined the least number of times. So make sure you practice and know this formula as to how to calculate a percentage change before you go into the exam. So let's take a look at this question. So figure 1 shows the sales volume for business X over a 3-year period. The selling price per unit across the 3 years is shown in table 1. So you've got 2 pieces of data that you will need to use in order to complete this calculation. Using the information provided, calculate to 2 decimal places, and make sure if you see this in a question in the exam, you underline that part of the question. So you must make sure you put your answer to 2 decimal places. And in Edexcel, you won't ever have to round. So the questions are developed or designed in such a way as no rounding will ever be required. So if you do need to round, that means you've probably made a mistake in your answer and you need to go back and check your workings. So calculate to 2 decimal places, so just write the 2 numbers after the decimal point in your answer, the percentage increase in revenue between last year and next year. So looking at that question, you don't actually need to use all the information from the graph, and also you don't need to use all the information from the table. So we'll have a look at the answer in a moment, but you've got a minute to have a go at calculating the correct answer. In the exam, remember, every calculate question would be worth 2 marks, so you would have 2 minutes if you're working to a minute a mark in the exam, and this means that you wouldn't run out of time to complete the 12-mark question, which is found at the end of each paper. But this time you've got a minute. If you need to take a few more seconds at the end of the minute allocation, then feel free to do so. So that is your minute up. As I said, if you'd like to take a few more seconds, then please pause the video now to finish off your calculation. So let's take a look at the answer, and it is 37.14%. So very, very well done if you've got that answer correct. So let's break down and see how we got to that particular figure. So we know that to calculate revenue, the formula is selling price per unit times number of units sold. So reading and combining the information from the graph and the table, we can see that the number of units sold last year was 700,000. If we multiply that by 5, that will give us a revenue of 3.5 million. The sales revenue for next year is £6. That's the selling price per unit. We can see that from the table. And we multiply that by 800,000, which is the number of units we expect to sell next year, which gives us a revenue figure of 4.8 million. So now we have everything we need in order to calculate the percentage increase. But we need to make sure we know the formula in order to calculate a percentage increase. So the formula is change over original times 100. So if we input those figures into the formula, we can see it is 4.8 million minus 3.5 million. We then press equals on our calculator and divide that answer into the original figure, which is 3.5 million. Once we've done all that, to get the percentage, we multiply it by 100, and that gives us 37.14%. So as I said, well done. It's a tricky question, this one, because you've got to combine lots of information together. There are also 2 pieces of distracting information. So all the information that links to this year, so that's in the table and in the graph, can be ignored. So read each question carefully and only use the data that is relevant to the question that has been set. Our next activity is our definition spinner. So I'm going to show you 6 key terms, and you need to be able to define the key term where the spinner lands. So 6 key terms from theme 1: exchange rate, franchise, entrepreneur, market report, market map, and focus group. You should be able to define each one of those, but let's take a look as to where the spinner lands. And it is in market map. So you may want to pause the video now to just think about the definition and the uses of a market map. So a market map comprises 2 axes which represent key features of the market. For example, high to low price, high to low quality, or younger to older customers. The existing products in the market are then plotted to identify if any gaps exist, and these gaps might represent a business opportunity. However, what's worth pointing out is if there is a gap identified, it might mean that that gap is not viable. It's not worthwhile setting up a business that is trying to target that particular area. So, for example, if we've got a low quality product in a market where high prices are going to be charged, would not be viable, so it wouldn't be worth exploring that gap. Let's go again with our definition spinner. So let's take a look at where the spinner lands this time. Same group of words. And this time it is on exchange rates, a really difficult topic area. Hasn't been examined extensively to date, so it's worth taking a look at that carefully or closely before the exam. It's under the economy and business, so under 1.5.4 of the specification, the group of topic areas I was mentioning previously. So you may want to pause the video now, think about what the definition is of an exchange rate, and perhaps 2 acronyms that could help support you if you had to write an answer explaining the impact of a change in exchange rates on a UK business. So an exchange rate is the value of one currency in relation to another. A currency such as the Great British Pound can appreciate in value against another currency, such as the US dollar. So that means £1, instead of being worth $1, if it appreciates, it would become £1 would be worth $2. This means more US dollars are gained for every pound converted. As a result, imports become cheaper. This is because a UK business would not have to convert so many Great British pounds in order to pay for the American goods. So they wouldn't have to convert so many pounds in order to gain the appropriate number of US dollars. But exports can become more expensive. So in order to generate a certain amount of revenue per unit sold in American markets, so going back to our example, so if we wanted to generate £1 for each unit sold in America and the exchange rate was £1 to $1, we would charge $1 in the American market. However, if the exchange rate appreciated to £1 equals $2, in order to generate that £1, we would have to now charge $2 in the American market. And the acronyms that I was talking about earlier are SPICED and WIPIDEC. So SPICE stands for Strong Pound, Imports Cheaper, and Exports Dearer. And that's the example that I've just spoken about here. The opposite is true if the pound weakens. So weak pound, imports dearer, and exports cheaper. So our second calculation countdown question is on screen. This time we're looking at percentages and the margin of safety, which is one of the financial concepts that is in 1.3.2 of the specification. So let's have a look at this question. Each month, the break-even point of a business is 6,250 units. Table 2 shows the percentage the actual output of the business is higher than the break-even point. Using the information in Table 2, calculate the margin of safety for the business for February. So you need to know the formula for the margins of safety. So the margin of safety, to help you out, is the difference between the actual output and the break-even point. So knowing that, you've got all the information that you need in front of you. You've got a minute to complete this calculation. As before, if you need a little bit longer, just pause the video at the end of the minute to finish off your calculation. Good luck. A very big well done if you've got the correct answer of 1,750 units. Now let's take a look at how we got to that point. So we've been asked to calculate the margin of safety for the business for February. That means we can ignore the data for January and March. So make sure you always read each question carefully, underline the key parts of the question so that you're selecting the relevant information only that will help to support your workings and for you to gain or calculate the final answer ultimately. So we've got our break-even point for each month of 6,250 units. Now, as I mentioned, the margin of safety is the difference between the current level of output and the break-even point. So what we need to do is work out the current level of output for February. So the actual output for February is 6,250, and we know it's 28% higher than the break-even point. So if we multiply 6,250 units by 1.28, that will give us our actual output in units for February, which is 8,000. To work out the margin of safety, all we do now is deduct or subtract the break-even point, which gives us a final answer of 1,750 units. So remember, the margin of safety is always calculated in units. In every calculate question in the exam, make sure that you put your answer on the answer line. This is where the examiner is trained to look first, and if the correct answer is there, you will automatically get 2 marks for each calculate question. But best practice is always to include full workings, because if you do mess up the final answer, it's not quite right, but your workings are accurate, you will gain 1 out of 2 marks. Our final activity for today's session is our application spinner, and it is so important that in sections B and C of each exam paper that you apply your understanding of business theory to the extracts that will appear in your source booklets. So we are going to have a little go at practicing the skills of application with this activity. So we're going to be looking at location factors in relation to one of these businesses, and they're all theme 1 types of business, so in terms of size. So we've got a bakery, a clothing store selling designer goods, a florist, a gym, an Indian restaurant, and a golf club. Remember, in paper 1, the businesses that will appear in the source booklet, in the extracts, will either be a new business startup, they could be a small business operating in the local area, or it could be a little bit larger business in terms of the business operating in more than one location across the UK. What it will not be in paper 1 is a public limited company and a business that operates internationally, because they link to theme 2 of the course content. So we're looking at the most important factors that a golf club would consider when deciding on its location. So you might want to pause the video now to think about 2 or possibly 3 factors that a golf club would have thought about when deciding where to situate itself. So try and think about language that is specific to golf clubs. So what we do not want is or are points that could relate to any of these businesses, so all 6 of them. So some points might be linked to other businesses, but not all of them. So pause the video and then come back when you have some ideas. So we've got nature of the business activity. So that phrase is taken from the specification. So it's purely theory, but what that means is, what does the business do? So the golf club would require a large amount of land with suitable soil to grow high quality turf. Now, out of those 6 businesses, that is the only business which would be concerned about that factor. So this is high quality context. It's going to get you application marks, as well as gentle slopes to ensure that 18 holes could be successfully played by its members. There should be sufficient space for a car park, as customers will travel to the club, as they're usually located on the outskirts of town where land is available. So that also could link to a gym, for example. They might be located a little bit out of town, and you would need sufficient car parking space for all the members that you had for your gym. But what we've got here throughout that response is green text, which land, we've got the 18 holes, and we know that golf clubs are usually located not in the centre of a city, but they are on the outskirts, because that is where the land is available in order to build a golf course which has 18 holes. You need sufficient land in order to be able to do that. It also needs to be located to customers who have high levels of disposable income, who can afford the membership fees. So you could argue that the clothing store selling designer goods needs to be located close to customers with high disposable income, but a clothing store wouldn't necessarily have members. So therefore that membership fee makes it specific to the golf club, and do not have the option to join an existing club. So again, that could link to the gym, but you can see here how we've twisted all our points to the golf club, and therefore this would enable us to gain application marks within an exam. So if you've got something similar with your ideas, very, very well done.